Hi, my name is Keith Cooper, Northlight Images, and this is about printers, what I'd like to see in printers, what's wrong with printers these days. Now, as some of you may know, I do an awful lot of printer testing, and this is partly based on printers I've tested over the last year or so. But what is wrong with modern printers, what needs fixing, but also what's right too, and I'll cover some of the simple things you can do to fix some of these issues and why fundamentally there's not that much wrong with modern printers, better quality printers, if you know how to use them properly. And that's something I address in a lot of videos. So I go through some stuff here, and I put also in the notes links to other useful info which I feel will help people get more out of their pictures. Because to me, you take a photograph, it becomes a real thing when you print it. And one of my aims is to try and help people get past that dislike and fear of doing printing and fear of the expense and other things like that. Because when you print your photos, to my mind, that makes it real. Now, that's not to say projected screen images are not, but makes a difference. Anyway, into that. What is the most complained about feature that I hear about with printers, modern printers? But also, what is easiest to fix? Anyway, the obvious one, ink costs. This bothers a lot of people. Now, you could say that it's a cost of printing. If you want to print, you have to pay the ink costs. Well, that's fair enough, but there's a popular opinion, and I don't say it's wrong, that many printers, and I've covered this in some recent videos, use far too high a proportion of their ink in cleaning. Whether that for maintenance, which most of it is, ink is used in printers as part of a cleaning process to keep them working well. Modern inkjet printers are very complex. The print heads themselves are very complex. And I'm not talking one-way Epson or Canon here, but they are complex devices and they need cleaning. It's much like an engine needs oil to run it. Now, in the case of a printer, it needs to use ink as part of its working medium. It needs it for cleaning. But how to get those ink costs down? Possibly the most obvious contribution that people see is ink tank printers. Now, there is only one ink tank printer I've ever actually positively recommended to people, and that's this, the Epson ET8500. We bought this one here for Karen's office. It still hasn't quite made it up to her office yet because I've been doing some more testing on it. But this is the only one I've ever actually recommended. And I've got a video, put a link into that, as to why this one was one that I said is one to get to use to get into printing. Now you think, well, hang on, why this Epson? Why not one of the Canon ink tank printers? Well, first of all, this one does A3+, and to my mind, if you want to get into printing, you want to have at least the option of being able to print at a larger size. An A3+, or 13-inch by 19-inch, is a nice big size. You can do smaller prints on it, and indeed I would suggest when you're learning to use a printer, don't rush out and buy huge great sheets of paper to get wrong and waste. Practice on smaller sheets. I've got lots of stuff about this in the reviews and all the videos about using these printers. But I said, why not Canon? Canon don't do an A3+ printer, this in an ink tank printer. If you want an A3+ one from Canon, you've got the Pro 200, the Pro 300, both good printers, one dye, one pigment ink based, but with cartridges. And since I'm talking about what people think is wrong about printers, it really does make a difference. Now you might say, oh, well, you know, the inks, they're not that expensive, the 200 and the 300, but it's about perceptions. And that's where the ink tank printers make the difference. People feel they are not paying so much for ink. They don't worry so much about testing things, about doing test prints, about doing multiple versions of prints, once again, on small sheets of paper if need be. They don't worry about that. The more you print, the better at it you get, the better the feel you get for it, the more confidence. It's a virtuous circle. And you end up doing more prints, although there is the question of what you're going to do with them, so do think about that. But you end up doing better prints, and that's the key. And I think if you do better prints, and they have to be, when it comes down to it, it doesn't really matter what other people think about them. It's about, are they prints you like? Are they prints that you're happy with? If that's so, then printing makes a difference. So Canon, yes please, I'd love to see larger ink tank printers, and while you're doing it, please fix colour management for Macs. I use Apple Macs for all my main work, and quite a few people do, and Canon have effectively broken colour management on their lower end printers. Not on the 200, the 300, the 1000, the 1100, which I've been recently testing. All very good. And I'll come back to colour management, some aspects of that, because that's an area that people do have trouble with sometimes. But in general, if you're going to produce ink tank printers, Canon, please fix the colour management so it actually works properly. Now, I've had to write down quite a few notes and things here for stuff, just so to make sure I remember everything here, because there are lots of little bits and pieces. But in general, ink costs, that worries a lot of people. Next up, paper handling. Now this, the 8500 here, 8550. The 8500 is a smaller version. The 8550, this, some printers make marks on some papers. I'd like to see that addressed. I'd like to see more robust paper handling for a variety of nice papers. Certainly for printers like this and higher end printers, you don't expect the printer to be making any marks. Incidentally, if you buy one of these and when you test it, it makes marks on the paper, say it's not good enough, go back to the person you bought it off and say, I want one that works properly. Don't accept it if you get a faulty printer to start with. Now, some thicker papers on some of these printers may show roller marks. I'd like to see that fixed, please. It would be really nice if it could be. It would just my one remaining niggle for some people for this. I don't see it on this one. I've tested this a lot. I don't get a problem with it, but paper handling could do with improving. In general, Canon, yeah, that's pretty good as well. All of these printers like this, they all have sort of pluses and minuses. There's no, it's very rarely I can say there's something best about it. There is this one because there's nothing in a similar bracket to it. So I haven't got any, because Canon don't make them this size, I can easily say, well, yeah, go for this one here. But yeah, that's one thing. Also on paper handling, borderless. Now, I don't like doing borderless prints very often, but I know a lot of people do. I would like to see printers actually capable of printing borderless prints on arbitrary sized pieces of paper. At the moment, if a printer supports borderless printing, then it only supports it on a few specific sizes. I'd like to see that extended so that if I set a custom size, if I for some reason want to make 11-inch by 16-inch prints, and set that as a custom paper size, it would be nice if it could be done borderless. I see no reason other than an arbitrary choice from the printer makers as to why borderless is only available on certain sizes. That should be fixable. I think that would, it's not perhaps a big win. It doesn't cause the problems that people gripe about, ink costs and cleaning costs and things like that, but it is a source of irritation to people. And it's one of those things I've often wondered why you can't have borderless printing on custom paper sizes. You can support custom paper sizes, so why not have borderless? Depends on the printer, maybe just for higher end printers, but no printer I've ever tested at any range allows me borderless on arbitrary paper sizes. Even big roll paper printers like this one here, Epson P5000, lovely printer, but it still won't do it. Now, I'm not that interested in printing on borderless, but it doesn't mean other people aren't. So, next bit, software. For handling it. It would be nice if, and this could well be on Macs, just the AirPrint print problem. It would be nice if it were easier to install printer drivers without getting them wrong. Now, this is one bit where Windows users can go, yeah, well, it just works. It does usually, but they have some of their own issues as well. But on Macs, for certain, there is a problem with the AirPrint driver. Canon, in fact, on their smaller printers, they force you to use the AirPrint driver, which is why printers like the G550, 650, 640, all of that range, their ink tank printers. Another reason, if you're a Mac user, why they are doubly useless. Because without good colour management, you are not going to get reliable reproduction of colour. And colour management is key to this. Now, with the software, it would be nice. Epson Print Layout and Canon PPL are excellent software packages. it would be nice if they could give a bit more attention to offering soft proofing. Now, soft proofing is something which I feel is often overused, but it is a useful feature. It's the sort of thing that I'd like to see available to people. Now, as a quick example, if I do a soft proof on, and I did a video recently about gamut and things like that, if I do a soft proof on an image like this, I may well find that some areas show up as being out of gamut. Well, they're quite often unimportant things, so it would be nice if there was a degree of flexibility introduced in the gamut checking. Now, that goes also for Lightroom if you want to use it, and for the gamut checking in Photoshop, which is what I use for stuff. It would be nice. So there are areas, that's not just printer makers. If you think it's the printer makers software, well, that's a bit of an extra to it in some ways. Now, I would like, personally, to see far more information in the specifications or available to people on media types, what they actually mean. Now, that's for me to make profiles and get better quality images. When I make profiles, such as profiles I've made for this, the A550, because not many people make them, and I made loads and loads. I put a note about that in the notes to the video. But when I'm making profiles, I often have to just guess at media settings. It would be nice if there was some information around that would actually help me make decisions, because if that information is there, I make better profiles. That makes the printers easier and better to use for other people who aren't bothered about this sort of stuff, about media settings details. This information, it feeds through. I try and make things simple to use, but I'm limited sometimes by the information I get from the printer makers themselves. I don't always have everything I want. It would be nice too if there was perhaps some sharpening options or image rescaling options in the software. Now, you could say these are free bits of software you're getting, the Canon EPL, PPL, but they're very good, and the software itself can also help sell printers. So I can see why the companies put the investment into it. There are a few areas I'd like to see improved on it, but they're around the edges. Now, roll paper. Lots of people say, I want a printer with roll paper support. This one doesn't have it. This big one does. The Canon Pro 1100, some people were disappointed that it didn't offer roll paper, 17-inch width paper. I would say be careful what you wish for, because roll paper is perhaps not the panacea that many people think it is. People think, oh, I'll use roll paper and I'll save on printing costs. Well, that's a bit of a nonsense, mainly believed by people who don't use roll paper or who don't have experience using it. I would say if you're not careful, you can end up using at least as much paper by printing on roll paper as you can by printing on this. And remember, this sheet here, and I can't remember which one this is, what paper, it's flat. If I'd printed this on roll paper, even though it's been out for a while, it would still probably have a bit of a curl on it. So sheet paper does have its advantages. Yes, roll paper can be useful, particularly if you do long panoramic images and things like that, but in general, sheet paper is pretty good for it. How about a few other technical issues? Well, I'd look on dye-based printers, which are nowhere near as bad. You get some people who say, oh no, for professional use, you absolutely need pigments. No, you don't. This has got dyes, it has pigment black as well, but this has got dyes on it. You don't need it. Prints from these on good papers, well looked after, can last for a long while these days. So some of that is a bit spurious, some of the stuff about using pigments and dyes. I would like to see better black dyes. And in terms of pigments, I'd like to see more attention to gloss differential, and still there is some prints and some papers I still see a bit too much bronzing. It's a lot less than it used to be, but I still see that. I'd still like to see that improved as well. But really, if you're thinking, come on Keith, you're just dancing around the edges here, where are the big key features you'd like to see improved? There aren't any. Modern printers are pretty good, and I've said this many times before, if you can't make a good looking print on a big printer like this, or even a mid-range printer like this, then something is wrong with your technique, your knowledge, or something like that. These printers, exceed most people's abilities, and the limitation is in the people actually doing the printing. Me too. So printers are good enough these days, but they do have niggles, and I've mentioned ones that put people off, like the ink costs and things like that. So I would like to see some better inks. Anyway, I said that I'd also cover some how to fix things, the simplest fixes to get better pictures. I've mentioned many times, don't have your screens too bright. Now, these aren't actually plugged into anything at the moment, but don't have your screens set too bright. If you have your screens too bright, you end up editing to make a great looking picture on the screen. That's fine if you want to show pictures on a screen or project them or something like that. However, remember, the dynamic range of an image on a screen is vastly more than the dynamic range you get on a print. Even if you've got sort of metallic papers like this one here, the dynamic range on this is still nowhere near what you can get on a screen. So having a screen too bright means you edit it for that. Then when you print it, and you tend to view prints under lower lighting levels than screens, certainly if you've got your screen too bright, then everything gets compressed and the shadows and the detail goes and everything looks too dark. So the simplest fix ever is, if your prints are too dark, check that your screen isn't too bright. I reckon that covers 80 to 90% of the issues I get asked about printing. Is just don't have your screen so bright. If incidentally, when you do make your screen dim, you think, well, the screen's too dim for the lighting I've got round here, take that as another quick hint. Reduce the lighting levels you work in. If you're working for print, work in lower light levels, have your screen a bit dimmer, and your prints, look at them under proper lighting when you're evaluating them, decent levels, and you'll suddenly find everything looks a lot better. So remember, the screen is not the print. In my own photographic workflow, because I'm a commercial photographer, my pictures need to look good on a screen and then they go off to somebody to deal with, because I don't print much commercially. And my images that I do print, as far as I'm concerned, for those images, the finished product is the print. And if the print looks good, that's great. If the screen doesn't look quite so good, doesn't matter. In fact, remember that the very best looking print may not come from the best looking image on the screen. So as a quick example, simple example, and I've covered this many other areas, when you're looking at an image on the screen and you think, oh, those colour balance is nice, and you print it out and the colours just aren't there. They're just not quite, I'm not talking about way out, but just don't have quite what you wanted. Quite often you can bump the vibrance and the colour saturation on the screen to a level that you think, that's a bit much. And then when you print it, it looks great. That's the difference, because the screen doesn't matter. And this is one of the issues I have with habitual use of soft proofing. Soft proofing can be very helpful, but don't overuse it. Don't include soft proofing as an automatic step in every print you make. Learn to use, and I've mentioned before, using test images and things like that. Learn to actually appreciate your prints. Look at your prints. Screen is an intermediate step. Doesn't matter if the screen doesn't look perfect if your print looks great, because it's the print that counts. So that's probably about all of it, because really there isn't much wrong with modern printers. Yeah, ones like this, some people have had paper handling issues. Now, sometimes that is because faulty printers do get out there. The Epson here, that's, paper handling is probably a weaker area. When I look at the Canon Pro 1100 that I've been testing, it's downstairs. When I look at that, the amount of ink it uses for cleaning feels excessive. Now, whether it is excessive or not is another matter, but it feels it. And if it feels it, that puts people off using it. And if people put off using it, they don't print so often. If you don't print so often, your prints aren't so good. And, well, that's about it, really. I've got nothing much more to complain about. I hope that's been of use. as you see, the real issues are relatively easy for the printer companies to fix if they want to. There are other ways around it, or you can just go, well, yeah, I can get prints and it makes my photography, I enjoy it, and that's really what matters. So if you've got any questions, please do let me know. Always interested to hear what people think, and have a look. Please do like and subscribe, and the usual stuff for the channel. We're approaching 50,000 subscribers, which is probably about 45,000 more than I ever thought I'd get. I've only been doing this for barely just over 4 years, so it's taken off very nicely. Thanks for watching. If you want the profiles for this, by the way, have a look at the notes. I've got lots available for this, particularly now we've got one here. Likewise for the 1100 or any other printer that I've tested. So thanks, and goodbye.